The squad car's siren wailed, slicing through the humid Alabama night, as Marcus Wright gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles tight. He was too late for the emergency hearing he'd promised to oversee, and now red and blue lights flashed in his rearview mirror. Before he could pull over, 2 officers were at his window, their voices sharp, accusing, assuming. "You're under arrest," one barked, yanking open the door. Marcus, a black man in a tailored suit, stepped out calmly, his judicial robe folded neatly in the back seat. He tried to explain, "I'm Judge Wright, I'm due in court," but the words drowned in their shouts. Handcuffs snapped around his wrists, cold and biting, as Officer Daniels sneered, "Save it for the judge, buddy." The other, Officer Reed, hesitated, his eyes flickering to the robe, but he said nothing. The crowd gathering on the sidewalk whispered, phones raised, capturing the indignity. Marcus's heart pounded, not from fear, but from the weight of a lifetime spent proving himself in a world quick to judge his skin. They shoved him into the squad car, the door slamming like a gavel. Marcus stared out the window, the town of Fairview blurring past, small, southern, and stubborn in its ways. He'd grown up here, knew its streets and its secrets, knew the sting of eyes that saw him as less. Yet he'd risen valedictorian, law school, now the youngest judge in the county, presiding over the very system that now cuffed him. The irony burned. He wasn't just a man, he was the law, and still, he was here, reduced to a suspect. At the precinct, the air was thick with tension. Daniels, broad-shouldered and brash, tossed Marcus's ID onto the desk. "Black guy in a fancy car. Probably stolen," he muttered to Reed, who shifted uncomfortably. Reed, younger, newer to the force, glanced at the ID again. "Hon. Marcus Wright, circuit judge." His stomach dropped. "Daniels, you see this?" He whispered, but Daniels waved him off. "Just another thug with a story." Marcus sat in the holding cell, his suit rumpled, his dignity bruised but unbroken. He didn't rage or plead, he waited. He knew the truth would surface, but at what cost? The system he served, the one he'd sworn to uphold, had failed him tonight. And not just him, every black man, woman, and child who'd ever felt the weight of a badge wielded like a weapon. His mind raced to his daughter, Lena, only 10, who'd once asked, "Daddy, why do they hate us?" He'd had no answer then. He still didn't. The precinct door swung open, and a clerk from the courthouse rushed in, her face pale. "Judge Wright?" She gasped, spotting him. "You're due in court now." The officers froze. Danielle's smirk vanished as the clerk's words hit. Reed's eyes widened, darting to Marcus, who stood, brushing off his suit. "Take me to the courthouse," he said, voice steady but laced with steel. "Now." The ride to the courthouse was silent, the air electric with unspoken questions. Daniels gripped the wheel, his jaw tight, while Reed stared out the window, guilt etching lines into his young face. Marcus sat in the back, still cuffed, his mind already in the courtroom. He wasn't just a judge tonight, he was a symbol, a challenge to a system that saw him as a threat before it saw him as a man. The courtroom buzzed as Marcus entered, cuffs removed but wrists still red. The crowd, lawyers, reporters, citizens, fell silent, sensing the storm brewing. Daniels and Reed stood before the bench, their case against a petty thief unraveling under Marcus's gaze. He donned his robe, the black fabric settling like armor, and took his place. "All rise," the bailiff called, but the words felt hollow. Marcus's eyes locked on the officers, not with anger, but with a piercing clarity that made Daniels shift and Reed look away. "This court is now in session," Marcus declared, his voice resonating. "Officer Daniels, Officer Reed, you stand before me today, charged with upholding the law. Yet tonight, you detained me without cause, based on nothing but the color of my skin." The gallery gasped. Daniels's face reddened, but he held his ground, defiant. Reed's shoulders slumped, his badge suddenly heavy. Marcus leaned forward, his presence commanding. "You assumed I was a criminal. You ignored my identity, my title, my truth. Why? The question hung, unanswered. Daniels opened his mouth, but no words came. Reed, voice trembling, spoke up. I saw the robe, sir. I should have said something. I'm sorry. Marcus nodded, not in forgiveness, but acknowledgement. The truth was a start, but it wasn't enough. The case proceeded, but the real trial was in the air. Trust, justice, humanity on the line. Marcus's rulings were fair, precise, but his mind churned. He thought of his grandfather, a sharecropper beaten for looking a white man in the eye. He thought of Lena, who deserved a world better than this. He thought of the badge, meant to protect, too often used to oppress. As the hearing ended, Marcus addressed the court. This system is broken, he said, voice thick with emotion. But it is not beyond repair. We are not beyond repair. He looked at Daniels, still defiant, and Reed, now reflective. You have a choice: uphold justice or perpetuate pain. Choose wisely. The gavel struck, echoing like a heartbeat. Word of the incident spread, igniting Fairview. Protests flared outside the courthouse, signs demanding justice for Judge Wright. Social media erupted, videos of Marcus's arrest trending, hashtags like Black Judges Matter gaining traction. The town, once quiet, now faced its reflection. Some defended the officers, citing procedure, others called for their badges, citing prejudice. Marcus, at home, watched the news with Lena, her small hand in his. Daddy, will it ever stop? She asked. He pulled her close. Not today, baby. But we'll keep fighting. The next day, Daniels and Reed faced an internal review. Daniels doubled down, claiming Marcus's car matched a suspect's description, a weak excuse, easily disproved. Reed, however, cooperated, admitting his silence enabled the mistake. I didn't speak up, he said, head bowed. I was wrong. The review board, under pressure, suspended Daniels pending further investigation. Reed received a reprimand but kept his badge, a chance to learn. Marcus returned to the bench, his resolve hardened. He began mentoring young black lawyers, pushing for reforms: body cameras, bias training, community outreach. Fairview's police chief, shaken by the scandal, met with Marcus privately. We need to do better, the chief admitted. Marcus nodded. Then do it. For my daughter. For all of us. Months passed, and the town began to change. Reed, now vocal about reform, worked with community leaders, his perspective shifted by Marcus's mercy. Daniels, stripped of his badge after further incidents, faded from view. Marcus's story became a beacon, a reminder that justice, though flawed, could be reclaimed. Lena, inspired by her father, dreamed of becoming a judge herself, vowing to carry his fight forward. Marcus stood in his courtroom, the same wooden gavel in hand, the note still pinned, justice demands truth. He looked out at the faces, black, white, young, old, and saw hope, fragile but growing. The system wasn't fixed, not yet, but every ruling, every word, every stand he took was a step. And he would keep stepping, for Lena, for Fairview, for a world where no one was judged by their skin, but by their truth. The weeks following Marcus Wright's arrest were a crucible for Fairview. The town, once content to simmer in its unspoken divisions, now boiled over. Protests swelled outside the courthouse, with marchers chanting for accountability, their signs a mosaic of pain and hope: no justice, no peace, Black Lives Matter, Judge Wright deserves better. The local news ran nightly segments, dissecting the incident from every angle. Some painted Marcus as a hero, a black man who'd beaten the odds only to be dragged down by the system he served. Others, clinging to old biases, whispered that he must have done something to warrant the stop. Marcus, however, refused to let the noise define him. He had a courtroom to run, a daughter to raise, and a legacy to build. In the quiet of his office, Marcus pored over case files, but his mind wandered to the bigger fight. He'd always believed in the law's potential to heal, to balance the scales. Yet that night in the squad car had shaken him, not his faith, but his patience. Change was too slow, and the cost was too high. He thought of his mother, who'd worked 2 jobs to send him to college, her hands calloused but her eyes fierce with pride. She'd taught him to stand tall, to speak truth, even when the world pushed back. Now, he felt her strength urging him forward. The internal review of officers Daniels and Reed dragged on, a bureaucratic tangle of reports and hearings. Daniels, unyielding, insisted he'd followed protocol, claiming Marcus's car, a sleek, black sedan, matched a stolen vehicle's description. The claim fell apart under scrutiny. No such report existed that night. Reed, meanwhile, grappled with his role. He met with Marcus privately, his voice low, almost breaking. "I keep replaying it," Reed said, eyes fixed on the floor. "I saw your robe, your ID, but I froze. I didn't want to cross Daniels." Marcus listened, his face unreadable. "You have a badge," he said finally. "That's power. Use it for good, or it's nothing." Reed nodded, the weight of his silence heavier than ever. Fairview's police chief, John Harlan, faced mounting pressure. The town council demanded answers, and the mayor, sensing an election-year crisis, pushed for quick fixes. Harlan, a grizzled veteran with a reputation for fairness, met Marcus at a diner on the edge of town. The air was thick with the smell of coffee and grease, and the booth creaked as they Saturday. "I'm sorry, Marcus," Harlan said, his voice rough. "This shouldn't have happened." Marcus sipped his coffee, his gaze steady. "Sorry doesn't fix it, John. Your officers need to see us as people, not threats." Harlan nodded, scribbling notes. "I'm pushing for mandatory bias training, body cams, the works. But it's gonna take time." Marcus leaned forward. "Time's a luxury we don't have. My daughter's growing up in this world. Make it happen." Back in the courtroom, Marcus's presence was a quiet storm. Lawyers noticed a shift. His rulings, always fair, now carried a sharper edge, a demand for accountability. He presided over cases with a clarity that left no room for excuses. One afternoon, a young black defendant stood before him, charged with petty theft. The evidence was thin, the arrest hasty. Marcus's eyes softened as he spoke. "This court sees you," he said, dismissing the case for lack of evidence. The defendant, barely 20, mouthed a tearful, "Thank you." Marcus felt a pang. How many others hadn't been seen? The community, too, was changing. A local pastor, Reverend Ellis, organized town halls, inviting Marcus to speak. At the first, held in a packed church, Marcus stood at the pulpit, his voice steady but raw. "I'm a judge, but that night, I was just a black man in a car," he said. "If that can happen to me, what happens to those without a robe?" The crowd murmured, some nodding, others shifting uncomfortably. A white woman in the back stood, her voice trembling. "My son's a cop. He's not like Daniels. But I see now how fear can blind them." Marcus met her gaze. "Fear's no excuse. We have to do better together." The room erupted in applause, but Marcus knew words alone wouldn't heal Fairview. Social media kept the story alive. A viral video of Marcus's arrest looped online, amassing millions of views. Comment sections became battlegrounds. Some praised Marcus's grace, others slung insults, calling him uppity or worse. Lena, now glued to her phone, saw it all. "Why do they hate you, Daddy?" she asked one night, her voice small. Marcus knelt, pulling her close. "They don't hate me, baby. They're scared of change. But we'll show them how." He started a mentorship program for black youth, teaching them about law, leadership, and resilience. Lena, proud, began writing essays about justice, her young voice echoing his. Daniel's review ended with his termination. Evidence surfaced of prior complaints: racial profiling, excessive force. He left Fairview, his career in ruins, but Marcus took no joy in it. Justice wasn't vengeance, it was accountability. Reed, meanwhile, became an unlikely ally. He volunteered for bias training, spoke at community forums, and pushed his colleagues to listen. At one event, he stood before a skeptical crowd. "I messed up," he admitted. "But I'm learning. Judge Wright showed me what justice looks like." Some clapped, others crossed their arms. Change was messy, but it was moving. Marcus's mentorship program grew, drawing kids from across the county. He taught them to navigate a world that often saw them as threats, but also to dream beyond it. One evening, a shy teen named Jamal asked, "How do you keep going when they hate you?" Marcus paused, then smiled. "They don't all hate you, Jamal. And those who do? Prove them wrong by being better." Jamal nodded, clutching a law book Marcus had given him. Lena, watching, whispered, "You're my hero, Daddy." Marcus's throat tightened. For her, he'd keep fighting. The courthouse became a symbol of hope. Marcus worked with Harlan to implement reforms. Body cams rolled out, bias training became mandatory, and community liaisons bridged gaps between police and residents. Fairview wasn't perfect, but it was trying. At a town council meeting, Marcus proposed a youth justice council, giving teens a voice in policy. The council approved it unanimously, a rare win. Lena, now 11, joined, her eyes bright with purpose. A year after the arrest, Marcus stood in his courtroom, the same wooden gavel in hand. The note pinned to it, "Justice demands truth," had faded but still held firm. He looked out at the gallery, filled with familiar faces, Reverend Ellis, Reed, even the woman from the church, now an advocate for reform. The case before him was minor, but every ruling felt monumental, a chance to rebuild trust. He struck the gavel, the sound crisp, final. That night, Marcus and Lena walked through Fairview's park, the air cool, the stars bright. "Daddy, did we win?" she asked. He smiled, ruffling her hair. "We're winning, baby. It's not over, but we're getting there." Fairview had scars, but it also had hope, fragile, hard-won, real. Marcus knew the fight would outlive him, but with Lena by his side, he believed in its future. What's right? What's wrong? Where does justice lie when a community's trust frays? Share your thoughts. Fairview's story is yours to shape.